Well, welcome to the EPSCoR IDeA Foundation Luncheon. Hello, my name is Michael Consari. I chair the EPSCoR IDeA Foundation. I also serve as Associate Commissioner for Sponsored Programs, Louisiana Board of Regents. I have a distinct pleasure of informing you that Dr. John Lorsch has kindly accepted our invitation to give a keynote luncheon speech today. We are very, very thankful that he was able to take time from his very busy schedule to attend this luncheon, which is an event that we've been looking forward to for quite a long time. Dr. Lorsch earned his PhD from Harvard. Did postdoc at Stanford, and then joined the faculty of Johns Hopkins University. Very quickly rose through the ranks to full professor, and now he's a director of National Institute of General Medical Sciences. What I'd like to do now is ask Dr. Bill Gurn to give some introductory remarks. Bill?
Thank you, Michael, and I promise I'm the last person you're going to see before you see Dr. Lorsch. Okay, just to make that perfectly clear to everybody. And I am actually saving Dr. Lorsch from his cheesecake, so I wanted to point that out. It is, as Michael said, it's just terrific to have Dr. Lorsch with us today. I'm not going to go through the biographical material. I wanted to say a few things, though. Dr. Lorsch became the director of the Institute for General Medical Sciences in August of 2013. And since then, he has become a really solid and consistent supporter for the IDeA programs, for which we're very grateful. But I think it's more than that. I think he sees the real view, the importance of them, and he's going to speak about that today. Just to kind of let you know about IGMS, the Institute for General Medical Sciences has a $2.37 billion a year budget. It is one of the largest. It does the fundamental biomedical work at the National Institutes of Health. They support 3,000 investigators across the face of this nation with 4,500 grants. So they do an awful lot of work in that regard. Just think about the number of investigators, think about the number of postdocs, the number of graduate students being trained with funding ultimately overseen by Dr. Lorsch. 26.3% of the NSRA trainees are funded through Dr. Lorsch's program as well. In addition to the things that Michael said, Dr. Lorsch has also done some time, and he'll talk about it today, focusing on the economic impacts of first of all, the fundamental research that is supported by IGMS. As I said earlier this morning, how every investigator is actually a small business operating in your university, and the importance of that. And also, he is also focused while he was at Johns Hopkins. In addition to several other things, he also focused on summer research experiences for high school students, and that speaks volumes to me about Dr. Lorsch's commitment to the science pipeline in this nation, the importance of getting people involved early on so that they can have terrific careers, hopefully something like Dr. Lorsch's. So without much more to say, thank you very much, Dr. Lorsch, for agreeing to do this today. I'm sure your comments will be very well received.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all, and thanks to the Foundation for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. I think I've tried twice before to come speak, and both times I was foiled by the weather. Once there was an ice storm, and once there was a blizzard. So today we're much more fortunate with the weather. As Bill said, I've been at NIGMS for just over 2 years. When I started in 2013, I actually knew very little about the IDeA program. And it didn't take me more than about an hour or two of looking into the program to realize just how important and impactful this program is and how lucky NIGMS is to be able to manage the program for the nation. And so I want to tell you a little bit about why I came so quickly to believe in this program and to be, I hope, one of the biggest supporters and cheerleaders for the program. Let me first start by just telling you a little bit more about the mission of NIGMS. I know some of you are familiar with it, but many of you may not be. We're often called the Basic Science and Training Institute at NIH. Our overarching missions are really twofold. The first is to promote fundamental research on living systems in order to lay the foundation for advances in disease diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. And the second, which is related to that mission, is to enable the development of the best trained, most innovative, most creative workforce for biomedical research possible. And those are the two things that we focus on every day. I want to also just draw your attention to our strategic plan. We published this just about a year ago, exactly. And it outlines the goals of the Institute, from big overarching goals to more specific objectives, down to implementation strategies. And we're now working on the metrics to measure our performance in all of these areas. So if you're interested, you can go to our website and get a really very detailed view of what it is we're working on and what our priorities are. One of the things we've done over the past year, as some of you know, is to set up a new center within the Institute, and that's the Center for Research Capacity Building, CRCB. The center is directed by none other than Fred Taylor, who many of you might have expected to see with me today, but I saw him as I was leaving and asked him if he was going to come with me. He said, "Nope, you're on your own. It's time for you to leave the nest." So here I am by myself. So the center, which again is led by Fred, houses our research capacity building programs. And there are 3 programs in the center right now. They're the EPSCoR program, which supports faculty development and research at institutions with a historic mission in serving underserved populations of students. The NARCH, or Native American Research Centers for Health program, which supports research and capacity building and training in Native American communities. And finally, of course, the IDeA program. And the IDeA program is made up of 4 core parts, and I'll tell you more about the 2 of those in a second. But overall, they're the Centers of Biomedical Research Excellence, or COBRES. I'll tell you about those in detail in a second. The IDeA Center for Clinical and Translational Research, which builds the capacity to do clinical and translational research in IDeA states. The INBRAs, which I'll also tell you about in a second, that are focused on training and biomedical research workforce pipeline. And then the IDeA co-funding, which supports grants, R01s, R15s, Pioneer Awards, from individuals from IDeA states that just miss the pay lines of other institutes, or at NIGMS as well. So the IDeA program will provide 2 years of support for those grants to incentivize those other institutes to pick up those grants and pay the rest of it. And that's a very successful program in moving faculty, especially junior faculty, from support by the IDeA program to independent funding by other NIH institutes and centers. Currently, there are 23 states and Puerto Rico that are IDeA states, and they're shown here. And I know we have representatives probably from all of these states in the room at the time. A question that I'm frequently asked when I go out and talk about NIGMS is, why is there an IDeA program? Why do we have the program? And there are 3 reasons that are often given, and all these reasons are absolutely true and are extremely important. The first is to enhance the biomedical research enterprise in states that have historically had low funding support from NIH, and those are the states that I showed you on the previous slide. The second is to improve outcomes for state-specific disease burdens. The disease burdens in Massachusetts, for instance, are not the same in terms of their distribution and their impact as those in Mississippi, for example. And if we had to rely on research going on in, say, Massachusetts, it would be skewed away from the disease burdens of those other states, such as Mississippi. Finally, one of the goals is to increase the economic activity in the biomedical and biotechnology sectors in IDeA states, and therefore improve their economies as well. As I said, these are all very important goals of the program, but I want to just draw your attention to what to me is the most important goal, and it's really an overarching one, which is to ensure that biomedical research, cutting-edge biomedical research, is going on in every state in the union. And so why is that important? I think the easiest way to see why that's important is to do the thought experiment and imagine what if it were not true. What if cutting-edge biomedical research was only going on in half the states in the country? What would be the effect on the research enterprise in the United States? And I think whatever dimension you want to look at, if that were true, the effect would really be negative and very profound. Okay, so imagine, for example, the diversity of research questions or approaches or creative ideas coming into biomedical research if only half the states were doing it. It would be tremendously diminished, and therefore that would impact negatively the strength of the biomedical research in the country. So the IDEA program really is a program in part to diversify the biomedical research enterprise, to strengthen it and to make it as efficient, as effective, and as thriving as it possibly can be. Another really important point to consider, and to me this is one of the ones that really drives me every day, is the fact that the IDEA program, which allows cutting-edge research to be going on in all 50 states and in Puerto Rico, allows us to tap into the country's entire talent pool, not just the talent pool in certain states. So imagine if a student, whether it be a high school student or an undergraduate living in Louisiana or in Maine, could only get experience of doing biomedical research, only find out what it was and the fact that he or she could participate in it if they moved out of their home state. We would lose all that talent from the national research enterprise, and that would be, in my view, devastating. So that fact alone, to me, really justifies the entire program, plus all of the other extremely important things I talked to you about. So let me just, for those of you who aren't familiar with the details of the program, I know many of you are, but some of you aren't, tell you about the COBRI and the INBRI in a little bit more detail, so you can understand when I talk about the outcomes of these programs, what I'm talking about. So the Centers of Biomedical Research Excellence, or COBRIs, has the objective to develop advanced research infrastructure, that cutting-edge biomedical research, and a critical mass of investigators to do that research in certain thematic areas. Okay, and those thematic areas are determined by investigators. This is an investigator-initiated program. They apply for these COBRI centers in an area of interest to them and their colleagues. So it could be cardiovascular disease, it could be a basic science question, it could be emerging infectious diseases. Whatever's of interest to them, those are then reviewed. Now, there are 3 phases to these awards. The first phase is to develop the research infrastructure, and in particular to focus on mentoring and establishing the careers of junior investigators. And this is a highly impactful part of this program, as I'll show you in a minute. The second phase, phase 2 COBRIs, further develop that once the seeds have been laid. So once there's technology in place, core resources, core facilities, once the investigators, particularly those junior investigators, are there, it hardens that enterprise and allows that research to really get off the ground and that community of collaborating investigators to really get their research going. The third phase, so these are each 5-year phases, the third phase is the wind down phase. So once things have been established and hopefully investigators are moving into independent funding outside of the IDEA program, they're bringing in that money from other parts of NIH, from other federal agencies, from private foundations, we want to continue for a period of time to support the core technology infrastructures that are so important for doing that research. Right? Advanced technology is obviously a critical accelerator of biomedical research, and so we give another phase to some of those COBRIs in order to allow them to keep that infrastructure in place and to move it into a new funding stream that will allow it to become independent of the IDEA program. And so that's the goal, to get it to a sustainable place where it can be maintained for the use of the individuals in that state or that region. Now, you can see the submission dates for those. One is just passed for the phase 1 COBRIs. There was one about a year ago for the phase 2 and one coming up for the phase 3. And as I'll tell you in a few minutes, we intend to make awards in these areas in the coming year or two. The second major part, as I mentioned, is the INBRI program, or the IDEA Networks of Biomedical Research Excellence. And this is a program targeted at bringing new talent into the research pool in IDEA states. And the way this network works is that there is one or more lead institutions, and these are research-intensive universities or medical schools that form the nucleus of this hub and spoke system. And then this one or more lead institutions is networked to a number of primarily undergraduate institutions, PUIs. And most of the money actually flows out of the lead institutions into these primarily undergraduate institutions. And the goal is to build their capacity to do undergraduate-based research. So it supports faculty development, it supports research projects by these faculty, and it also allows the students to do research in both the PUIs and also to come for the summer to the lead institutions and experience research in these research-intensive places. Now, as I'll show you, the impact of this program is really quite profound in these states. Again, it builds a statewide multidisciplinary research network, provides support for the undergraduates and their faculty to do research, and serves as a pipeline into health research professions in the state. It increases the support for the research faculty and for postdoctoral fellows and other students, and enhances the science and technology knowledge of the state's workforce, which obviously can also have an impact on the economy of the state. So to summarize what we're funding at this point, we have 24 INBREs, one in each state and Puerto Rico, 107 COBRE centers, and 5 IDeA Clinical and Translational Research Development Awards currently. There are about 1,000 investigators supported both by the COBREs and also by the INBREs, and 70 by the CTRs at the moment. There are hundreds of research projects, and they are generating a great deal of knowledge as measured by publications. And I'll show you more details of that in a second. You can see the breakdown of the COBRE awards in the circle. So I want to tell you a little bit about the impact. This is the overall landscape. But what's important to look at is how do we know this program is so effective? I've told you, my rationale for it based on a priori principles, which I certainly stand by. But what do we know about the impact? So let me show you a little data. One of the central features of NIGMS's strategic plan that I mentioned to you before is that we want to make data-driven decision-making central to everything that we do. And so here's a little bit of that. So this graph that you can see here shows a number of different things. The blue bars on the bottom are the funding for the entire IDeA program, the congressional appropriation, between 1997 and 2015. So you can see that it really grew beginning in about 2000, and that's the left-hand axis in millions of dollars. The red line shows the non-IDeA NIH funding to IDeA states in that same time period. Okay? And you can see that that dwarfs the IDeA funding, and it grows dramatically in that time period. The green line, which is the right-hand axis, is the overall success rate for NIH applications for R01s and other research project grants in that same time period, for everybody, not just IDeA states. Okay? So what's striking here, again, is a little bit of catalytic money spread across all these states generates this big increase in overall competitiveness in terms of NIH funding for the states. Now, you may know that between 1998 and 2003, Congress doubled the budget of the NIH, so you might expect, in fact, that maybe these states would be more competitive and would be equally competitive and get a doubling, although that's not necessarily true. But even so, this increase in that time period is actually bigger than the doubling. So even with the doubling as a consideration, this is a threefold increase in the amount of money going from the NIH into the IDeA states. The other thing to consider is that during this time period, as you can see in the green line, the success rate fell for everybody dramatically, and yet the IDeA states were able to basically keep even and level and not succumb to that decreased success rate. And so this is evidence, in fact, and it's picking up in 2015 again. This, I think, is evidence that this, again, catalytic money put in through the IDeA program has really had quite a profound effect in terms of the ability of these states to do research, as measured by funding from other NIH institutes and centers. Now, another thing to look at is the output. On the left-hand side, it shows the number of investigators in both COBREs and INBREs. I told you about that before. And what you can see is if you focus on the COBRE line, between, I think, 2009 and 2015, it's been basically steady, flat. On the right-hand side is publications, and the yellow bars are publications from COBRE centers. And you see that despite the number of investigators being basically flat in that time period, the number of publications has continued to increase. In fact, almost looks like it's going to start going exponentially. And that means that these centers are really starting to hit critical mass and to generate new scientific knowledge that eventually will, we hope, translate into cures and other advances in medicine. So I think that's really quite a heartening figure. Now, I've mentioned that one of the key goals of the COBRE centers is to promote junior investigators in their careers. So what kind of outcomes do we have there? Well, as of 2013, over 80% of junior investigators who were associated with COBREs had obtained non-IDEA independent research support for their studies. And that's really quite impressive if you think about it. If you think about how hard it is right now to be a junior investigator and to try to get funding. I want to tell you, I see JT here. It's good to see you, sir. I want to tell you about a visit I had recently with Senator Shelley Moore Capito down to her state of West Virginia to look at the scientific research that was going on, sponsored by the IDeA program and NIH in general. And this was really a very invigorating trip that we took down a few months ago. The senator and I saw just how impactful this program was in terms of those junior investigators that I told you about. So you can see on the upper left and bottom right, the senator talking to several of the junior investigators that are supported by COBRE centers. And I think the excitement of these young scientists, the impact of their work, the importance of the research questions that they were tackling was really very evident and came through quite clearly. We also, of course, talked to a number of the students that were involved in the INBRAEs. Down at the bottom is the senator with Gary, the director of the INBRAE in West Virginia. And at the top is the senator with a number of the INBRAE students and former INBRAE students who came to tell her about the impact that the INBRAE had on their careers. And I'm going to show you a few quotes in a minute from these kinds of students. But over and over again, at this visit and at other visits that I make to IDEA states and institutions, you hear from these students how this changed their lives being in the INBRAE program, how they had no idea that they could do this kind of research. They didn't even know that research was possible for them. And the INBRAE allowed them to open up totally new horizons that they hadn't dreamed of before. And over again, one of the young gentlemen in the back row behind the senator is now in an MD PhD program. All the others are either in graduate school or conducting independent research on their own after graduate school. Tremendous success stories. So one of the things that we saw when we were down in West Virginia, and again I see over and over again when I go to IDEA meetings or visit IDEA institutions, is that the IDEA program is full of best practices. Best practices that really should not just be used in IDEA states, but should be disseminated to all the states in the country, because they would improve the efficiency and effectiveness of biomedical research throughout the nation. So a few of these things that the senator and I saw, and that I see over and over again: the scientific training and opportunities in the INBRAE networks that I mentioned to you before, the support and mentoring of early stage independent investigators through the COBREs that we just discussed, and the cooperation and sharing of resources, technology, centers, other resources by institutions and states and among states that create synergies and economies of scale to get more for the taxpayers' money in terms of scientific research and eventually cures and other advances in medicine. So I just want to show you a little data for each of these. And I'll start with the first. And actually the first, I'm going to descend into anecdote. And I understand that the plural of anecdote is not data, but sometimes words are worth 1,000 words, right? That sounds like something Yogi Berra would have said. But you got to give me credit for it because I made it up. Okay, so here's some words, INBRAE students' words. I looked around for about 20 minutes to find examples of quotations from INBRAE students. I found literally dozens in about 20 minutes. They all say basically the same thing. I'm going to show you 3. And these, again, echo what Senator Capito and I heard over and over again in West Virginia. Daily, I see myself achieving and conducting scientific research I never in my wildest dreams thought possible. Never in my wildest dreams thought possible. I don't think I would have continued my education had it not been for this program. Currently, I am in my second year as a graduate student, and I'm in the middle of submitting my first fellowship. I had never thought about research as a career prior to being an IDeA student. This fall, I will attend graduate school working towards a PhD in biochemistry, a student after my own heart, and I give credit for IDeA for first showing me the possibility of this career path. Again, these are just examples, but I could have picked dozens of these for you, just like that. This is what we hear over and over again from these incredible students, that it changed their lives. Now, I also want to talk about some data to support this assertion that the early stage independent investigators getting mentored through the COBREs is a critically important and very successful part of this program. I showed you the data about the overall success rate in terms of getting independent funding. Recently, a very nice controlled study was done by a group in Nevada, and I have the reference at the bottom, where they took a matched set of early stage investigators, matched in terms of their training and their publications, and they compared a set that didn't have support by the COBRE and mentoring by the COBRE to one that did. And I'm just showing you sort of the take-home message here. This is the percentage of successful junior faculty in those two cohorts, again, matched for backgrounds. And you can see there's a threefold increase in success. And what is success here? Success was getting non-IDEA external funding and publishing at least one paper on which the investigator was the senior author. That's a huge effect, right? You don't see effects like that very much in these kinds of settings. And so I'm really quite impressed by this, and really very pleased that they did the study, and encourage others to look into these kinds of questions as well. Finally, cooperation and sharing of resources to create these synergies and economies of scale, getting the taxpayers more for their money. So we've seen this over and over again. Down in West Virginia, we saw that West Virginia University and Marshall University, rather than following the model that takes place frequently in non-IDEA states, where each institution has to have at least one of everything of its own, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of everything of its own, they decided to pool resources and create a joint genomics facility. So each one has a different kind of sequencing, DNA sequencing apparatus. They transmit samples between the two to do sequencing and experiments, and they transmit information. And it works extremely well. Everyone is very pleased with it. It wasn't a barrier to research. In fact, it was an enabler of research because it allows them to do more with the funding that they have. When I was up in the Northeast Regional IDEA meeting just a few months ago in Maine, I saw another example of this, really quite impressive. The entire Northeast region shares their bioinformatics core facilities, okay, to create one gigantic network that helps both the research and the student training in those states. You can see Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island, Delaware. This is helped by the fact that the IDEA program actually built a high-speed computer network for these states to link them together. And now, as I said, their bioinformatics networks are linked together to create these incredible efficiencies and synergies. It improves access for all the investigators to different kinds of bioinformatics technology and resources. The other thing they've done that's very innovative, and I was very impressed by, was that they use this as a shared teaching platform for all the students in the state. They hold classes and workshops that are hands-on and actually discovery-based learning. And they do this by having a sequencing project. They're actually sequencing the skate genome, this flat fish. You might say, well, what does that have to do with human health? But it turns out the skate is a good model for various immunological processes and various developmental processes. But it's also a great tool for teaching students because they're actually doing real science as they're learning how to do this. So I think this is really quite impressive. And of course, through this, it creates new research opportunities and collaborations. People studying how zebrafish can repair damaged organs as a model for trying to get humans to repair damaged organs. So it turns out a zebrafish can have tremendous damage to its heart. Part of its heart can actually become removed, and it can completely repair it, right? Humans, of course, can't do that. Myocardial infarction, you're left with a damaged heart. If we can understand how zebrafish do it, it's possible we can figure out a way to make humans do it. We have the same pathways, and groups in these states using this shared bioinformatics research are studying how small pieces of RNA allow zebrafish to turn that process on, that organ repair process on, or keep it off, and why it's off in humans. Right? Now imagine if we could do that. We could turn it on when you have a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, repair your heart. Zebrafish can also repair damaged limbs. They can completely regenerate a limb, their tail fin, if it gets cut off. Imagine if a wounded warrior missing a limb, we could turn the pathway back on and repair that limb, regenerate it. Science fiction at this point, but it could happen, right? All right, so let me just tell you a little bit about the future. So Bill mentioned our budget was 2.37. He underestimated it. Thanks very much this year to Congress. Our budget was increased to over $2.5 billion. That's the NIGMS budget. In particular, the IDEA budget, you can see the language there, $320,840,000 is provided for the IDEA program. That's a 17%, over 17% increase in the program. And in the report language, it said, in recognition for the success of this program. And we are extremely grateful to JT and his boss and all of her colleagues on both sides of Capitol Hill for this increase. And we're going to use it extremely wisely, I hope, as I'll tell you in a minute. The funding plan for IDEA in particular is really twofold. And the thing we have to be careful of when we get an increase like this is if we put all the money this year into things that had long-term commitments, 4 or 5-year commitments, it would mean next year those funds might not be there for an increase. So we might see a big jump in success rate followed by a decrease. So we have to be careful to manage how much we put into long-term commitments and how much we use in short-term, highly impactful opportunities so that more money is available next year for the additional long-term commitments, and we can keep the success rates high over a period of time. So in terms of the long-term commitments, we will be making more COBRE Type 1 awards. We had a number in the pipeline, and we're going to be making awards. We'll be making 4 new CTR awards this year to increase the total number that there are, and another INBRE to Nevada will be made this year. In terms of the short-term commitments, so that we can make more of the COBREs, INBREs, and CTRs next year, the funding plan looks like this. The co-funding initiative I told you about, where we will provide 2-year support for grants that miss the pay line at other institutes to try to get them to pick those grants up in the long term. We will be increasing our support for those this year, because those are 2-year commitments for us. We're also going to be having an administrative supplement program to INBREs and COBREs. And this will allow the consolidation of core facilities, both at institutions and hopefully in regions. Okay, so one thing that we've heard over and over again from IDEA investigators is, again, the importance of these technology-driven core facilities, but they're concerned that when phase 3 of the COBRE ends, what's going to happen? And so we're providing these supplements to allow consolidation of facilities, the creation of economies of scale to make these more sustainable. And this experiment is actually building on something that was done during the Recovery Act, which was nationwide and allowed this same kind of thing. A paper was published on it showing an incredible impact of this thing. Huge gains in efficiency when institutions took this little bit of catalytic money, consolidated facilities, created homogeneous business plans, and administration. They really dramatically increased the operational efficiency of these programs. We're also continuing to work on a plan that many of you have heard about to develop regional commercialization accelerators. What we'd like to do is put an accelerator in each of the IDEA regions, which would provide various kinds of resources to bring scientific discoveries out of the academic lab into small business commercialization. So these would be things like mentoring in entrepreneurship, help with technology transfer, various kinds of consulting services to provide knowledge and skills that most academic researchers don't have to bring discoveries again into the commercial space. And so we're still working hard on this. There are obstacles that remain. We don't want to do this. We're not going to do this with IDEA funds. What we want to do is use NIGMS's SBIR, STTR funds. I mean, that's how we're committed to this. We want to use the Institute's SBIR, STTR funds in order to allow these centers to be set up. But there are some issues that we have to overcome first. But we're still working on that, and Bill was very instrumental in helping think of this as an idea. Now, whenever I talk about the budget, I show this slide, okay? And it's a particularly important slide to show here in Congress because they were the ones that had the faith in us and NIH and the program to give us that increase in funding. And I really want to make the point that that funding is not monopoly money. It is hard-earned taxpayer money, right? And it's absolutely incumbent on all of us to take the faith that Congress had, that we would use this money well, and to make sure that we are using it as efficiently and as effectively as we possibly can to advance the mission of NIH, which is to improve our understanding of living systems and advance treatments for diseases, and the specific mission of the IDeA program. Okay, things can always be done better. I've told you how great this program is and how great you're all doing, but that doesn't mean we can't do things better. So let me just end on this note of our stewardship role, which is critically important from my point of view, and talk about some of the goals I'd like to see the IDeA community set for itself. First, of course, keep doing the great science you're doing. Keep doing the great training you're doing. As I said, everything that you're doing is incredibly impressive, but keep innovating, okay? Keep pushing forward the innovations in science, the innovations in training, and in particular, looking for additional efficiencies, synergies, and economies of scale so we can get American people, the taxpayers, and their representatives in Congress, more for the money that they give us, okay? And you guys are the best at finding those efficiencies and synergies, but keep looking for them. Again, those are models, and I'll just skip to the last one for a second. Disseminate these best practices nationally. It's good if they're in the IDEA states, but it would be even better if the entire nation started using these efficient practices, okay? So I would ask you to serve as really the proselytes and go out and tell everyone how things can be done better because you are doing them better, and I need you to help me get the message out to the rest of the country. And finally, measure the outcomes of what we're doing. I showed you a number of studies. I showed you data both from NIH and NIGMS and from some of you. Keep doing that because we need to show what the impact of this money is, but we also need to find ways, as I said, to use it even better. And the way to do that is to see what's happening now and to use that as a measure for improvement. So I thank you very much and look forward to seeing all the great things you're going to keep doing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you available?
I'm happy to take questions.
Are there any questions for Dr. Moore? Go ahead.
So how about as an idea for sort of efficiency of joining your commercialization program with other IDEA programs, in other words, with the NSF. In other words, all of the programs have issues with commercialization. Why not work together?
That's a terrific idea. That's a terrific idea. I think we should investigate that and see if we can break through some of these barriers together and maybe create economies of scale for ourselves in terms of those things. That's a great idea. Thank you. Let's see. I can show you. You ask us. That's the easiest way to do it because we have the data in hand. So here's the institutes that had the grants that we co-funded, and you can see they are spread across the entire NIH. Okay, some more than others. And then here is the geographic distribution of those co-funding, and we're happy to provide those to you, when you like. One thing we could also do is I hope that you're all subscribed to our feedback loop post blog. That's where we provide information to the community and also get input from you. We'd be happy to do a blog post on this periodically to show you the distribution and have that out there publicly on the web. One thing I would encourage, just since I know it's not always clear how how do you get your grant to be considered for this? If you have a grant that's somewhere in the vicinity of where you think should be funded, whether the institute publishes a pay line or it just got a good score and you think it should be considered, contact your program officer and tell them about the co-funding. Because as much as we try to get the word out, there's a lot of people that work at NIH and we can't individually talk to every person. So some people know about it more than others, and if you can be your own advocate and say to your program officer, hey, listen, my grant got a good score, and NIGMS has this program where they'll co-fund the first 2 years of the grant. Would you consider it? You'll have a much better shot of getting it there. So I would really encourage you to be proactive. If you have any questions, contact us as well. We can also help advocate on your behalf to have it considered for the co-funding program.
There was a question here.
It was similar. I was curious about how much money would go to the co-funding out of the 320 or whatever.
It depends on how many applications for the co-funding we get, so I can't give you the specific number. It's a little bit dependent on application pressure. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Go ahead.
So you mentioned that how to disseminate best practices out of the IDEA space into the country at large. The Navy website has a best practices section to it, and we should anybody help. But what are your thoughts in terms of getting these out beyond our own network?
Well, I think that's a great idea. We could begin to collect some of these and put them out there as well. We could act as a clearinghouse. I think that would be an interesting thing to explore further. Again, you just as advocates, when you speak to colleagues, certainly I would encourage an organic dissemination and diffusion of this information. Sometimes peer pressure is the best way, but I think it's a great idea that we could think about consolidating them and making them available.
You alluded to, doing a good job in reporting on the impacts of your programs. Are there any metrics that you think we're falling short in that we ought to do a little bit better job in measuring the impacts? Are there standard list of core metrics that you really want?
Well, that's a good question. It's up to you. We don't have any list at this point. That is, for us to require something is a whole separate issue. So we're looking to you again to come and to innovate in this space. One thing that again impresses me in the INBRAEs is what a great job they're doing in terms of tracking the outcomes of their students. I go to the INBRAE meeting. Carolyn has talked about this. You guys are way ahead of the rest of the country in terms of tracking student outcomes. It's something we as Bill said, are very invested in training overall in the country. Half of the graduate student T32 NRSA slots that NIH gives are from NIGMS, but a national conversation is how do you follow the outcomes and show that these various programs are actually as effective as they could be. The INBRAEs are way ahead in that. Yes, go ahead.
So that the Navy National Association of IDEA PIs, we actually have a form that's asking for specific information about students. It's what the INBRAEs and the COBRAs have been collecting probably since the beginning, since the year 2000. NIH does not have a way to track this data, but we've been collecting it. Navy has the form, you go on the website, you get the form, we actually have a data entry person who will put the data into our database, which we've built. And so Navy has all of these pieces in place to collect data, not only student data, but funding and economic impact, number of participating faculty, et cetera, et cetera. It's the things our annual progress reports give to NIH every year. And I could also speak about the best practices. That's open to anybody who wants to look on the NAEPI website, naepi.org, best practices, and we have many examples. Anybody can send to NAEPI, and we have a committee that vets the best practice before we put it on the website.
Yeah, that's a great point. The NAPI website is the place to go.
One last.
Another capacity building program called Build.
Build,
And,
yes.
yet it's outside the center, but it has many of the same goals. Is there any thought of bringing it into the IDeA?
So Build, as you know, so the Build program was started as a common fund program in the Office of the Director. That's where the funds come from. It was moved just last year to NIGMS to manage the program. And it's actually in the sister part of our institute, which is the Training, Workforce Development, and Diversity part of the institute, the Division of Training, Workforce Development, and Diversity. And the reason that we put it there was because it matches very closely a number of the programs that are there and can synergize with those programs, like the MARC program, for example. But it was also working closely with Fred and his team. And in Alaska in particular, since there is a build site as well as in Embry, and also in Louisiana, we've really been encouraging those groups to work together so that they're synergizing as opposed to duplicating. And I hope you'll help us with that.
All right,
Thank you
well,
very much.
Thank you very much.
Can we tell everybody where to queue up? Yeah, I was just going to do that. Well, you go ahead. Excuse me, for everybody who is going back on the bus, what we're going to do is when you walk out the door, go in that direction. At the end of the hallway, you'll see a restroom if you need to go to the restroom before we get back on the bus. But just kind of stay into this area, and then I'll lead you back around to where we can get on the buses. Thank you.